I couldn't believe my eyes. They did it. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. What did they do? Guitar Center brought back the bats. But let's see, what did they come up with this year? It's a J-45. We have not seen one of these things before. And we've also never seen one at such a cheap price. Well, to be fair, cheap in a relative sense, these were $4,499 brand new, which is expensive, don't get me wrong, but as compared to the full Bats in Flight model that's usually about $9,000-ish brand new, it's about half price. But we also have a different body style. You've got the J-45 standard with its rounded shoulders versus our more square shoulders of the Dreadnought Acoustic. So I definitely had to pick this one up to document it because it's a brand new Bats model, but they also introduced another acoustic. Same body style as before, just introduced in Midnight Edge, which is this really interesting blue burst. They were $8,499 and they sold out very quickly. But you might be saying, hey Trogly, why didn't you tell us about these in October when they were very seasonal? Well, that's the thing. These didn't launch until November 8th of 2024. But in case you missed my previous Bats episode, these were first introduced in 2018 with the Bats in Flight in kind of a trans black finish. In 2019, they brought it back in a cool purple burst. And at that time, they also introduced a Les Paul version. They followed that up in 2020 with the blood red burst on the acoustic, as well as the Les Paul. But from 2021, 2022, 2023, we just assumed this project had been abandoned by Guitar Center. But it's actually kind of funny. Michael Doyle, one of the higher ups at Guitar Center, reached out to me around April because he saw my Sparkle Top Deluxe videos and he's like, hey, that's really cool that you love that model too. Here's why we couldn't make our Deluxe Sparkle Top tributes exact at that point in time. And I brought up the Bats in Flight model with him and I said, hey, people really want these to come back. So whether these two new ones were in the pipeline before that or not, I'll never know. But the fact that they came out late makes me think, well, maybe, just maybe. Either way, November 2024, we saw the J-45 come back as well as the blue acoustic. As of right now, will there be a blue Les Paul? That's what we're on pins and needles for. No one at the companies can tell us for sure. Maybe they decided not to do it. Time will tell onto that. But let's see what makes this one unique. It reminds me a lot of the Slash Vermilion burst. It's a very vibrant red, and the spec sheet was calling it an ebony to red, so I was expecting this to be a dark black border into red, but no, honestly, it's not at all. In person, it's more like a maroon into a bright red. But I got the shock of my life. The official box tag from Gibson labels it Purple Burst. I wonder if that was a mistake, or did Guitar Center actually order them purple and it just didn't really work out. I personally fell in love with this rosewood bridge because it had a lot of cool like blood red streaks in it. And at first I thought, oh yeah, that's just going to be a standard feature on that. That's a cool idea. But looking at the stock photos of the other ones that they had within their inventory, nope, that's just a special thing for this one. Doesn't look pretty cool in person. But you'll notice a big lack of bats on your bridge, nothing on your tortoiseshell pickguard. However, they actually did change the inlays this year for the bats, at least on this model. At first, I thought they were outlines, but no, they've just added some more black stenciling into them. For example, here's a second year bats iteration, and here's our 2024 bats. That's very different looking. Then here's the 12th fret inlay as compared to the old one. There were a lot of complaints that these looked a little bit too cartoony. I'm wondering if they took that into mind when they were designing these to give them a little bit more ghastly features. And then as far as our headstock, nothing fun up here. No bats, no colored logos. If we're being honest here, this one's kinda lame in comparison, but it's a new model that's never had bat inlays before, so I figure why not? The backs are just complete black. On Guitar Center's website, it lists the neck as satin. I can tell you it is not. It is full gloss. However, this is a custom shop produced guitar at this point. Because if you compare this model to the regular J-45 standard, there's a $1,500 price increase. However, keep in mind, I do believe the regular Gibson J-45 standard is a USA non-custom shop product. I could be wrong on that, but that might make up for some of it. And it gets the new fancy pearl inlays and a custom color finish. finish. I wish this one still could have had the bats on the bridge or the pick guard, or at least something special on the headstock, or a bat decal, but you know, whatever. I'm just happy these are back on their radar, and I'm loving this neck profile so far. It's nice and beefy. But besides just our guitar, we've got a hard shell case. It's just the standard black Tolex version that they've been using lately, and the interior is ebony. And as far as case candy, we get a half booklet COA labeled as J-45 bats, our Gibson custom acoustic warranty pamphlet filled out as 9/28/24. They were so close to having these out on time. But that's interesting because at the time of recording, there's still some of these J-45s left, and I think that comes down to A, it's not as fancy of a model, and B, there was no advertising because they weren't available until after its peak season. So they just kind of quietly launched these, and in fact, shout out to Paul Fraley's Guitar Signal over on Reverb. I would have missed these myself if it wasn't for him sending me a message. But back to our case candy. Gibson polishing cloth, looks like a pick holder, truss rod tool, and a one-time use humidipack sample. First impressions and history aside, let's go ahead and throw this one over on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs to realize why this might actually be a player's favorite bats. Inside our new bats model, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So as far as our binding, they go for 3-ply along the top. You get a primary cream layer with a small black and another cream. Your rosette is done very similarly as far as the layers go. And it can be a little bit hard to tell until you get bright lights on it. It is still a tortoiseshell pickguard, well, tortoiseshell colored anyway, in a teardrop shape. And as I was conditioning the fretboard, it finally hit me. I understand what Guitar Center's saying now. It's ebony back and sides with red burst top. Not ebony red burst in reference to the top, but our bridge is looking pretty cool now that I've conditioned it. This is the only one that I saw out of the initial batch of 5 that had a lot of coloring within it. Some of them had really dark fretboard. You can take a look at the ones that I was able to capture. This one had a pretty rosy fretboard, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But this right here might be a selling feature for some people. This is the only Bats acoustic model to actually come stock with the LR bag system. When we reviewed that purple one, I was shocked when that was a dedicated acoustic. So you've got your little volume and tone selector here just right on the inside of your sound hole. Let's break out the endoscope to take a look on the inside. We can clearly see our sound hole sticker labeled as J-45 bats for the first time. Then we've got our serial number dating it to the 236th day of 2024, production number 20 for that particular day, and the Gibson custom branding underneath that. But right where the neck joins into the body here, that's where they glue on your battery compartment, and these things fall off after a couple of years. They're kind of a pain in the butt. But that just utilizes a regular 9-volt battery, and those wires eventually lead back over here to that thing that we saw get attached to the side of the sound hole. We can take a look around our curved edge. The J-45 standard is constructed with mahogany back and sides. However, the top is Sitka spruce, as is common with most Gibson acoustics. But the way you plug into these is the bottom strap button actually becomes your output jack. So that's why it looks a little bit different. But this is an under-saddle piezo bridge. So remember what we were talking about right here? That's what senses it underneath your saddle. So you can see it entering it right there. That's why they call it the under-saddle piezo. But then eventually that ties in with your control wire down here too. But while we're in here, might as well take a look at our bracing style. Spec sheet didn't tell me what kind, and I'm not an acoustic expert. So feel free to chime in if that looks familiar. Take a look at the ones on the bottom just to complete our documentation. That was a lot of fun, but it is a 2-piece spruce top. You can see a seam line right here. And here's a look at the saddle itself and a look at one of our bridge pins. But moving on from our rosewood bridge, Sitka spruce top, mahogany back and sides, this is a rosewood fretboard. And I really love how streaky and red this one is. It matches perfectly with the theme. Like, I love these Bats models with an absolute passion, but even I can agree the J-45's kind of a meh in comparison to the others. But we already talked. I mean, you save about half the price of the big fancy ones. It makes it a little bit more accessible. But if you're gonna have one, it might as well be cool. But what I really love is the edges of this fretboard. Even though we don't have binding, the rosiness of this board still peeks through, especially on the treble side. That's a fantastic sight. As far as your side marker inlays, they're just regular dots. I measure about a 1.75 inch nut width, which is a tusk nut, by the way. By the 10th, it increases to 2.05. First fret neck depth, 0.85, and 0.9 by the 10th. Those numbers are actually a lot smaller than I was expecting. Here's a look at that neck profile at the first fret and the 10th fret. You can see it starts out a little bit more rounded it, but then gets a slightly flat back to it. Still within the family of C-shaped neck, though. And we've got a 12-inch fretboard radius with a 24 3/4-inch scale. Now our headstock, nothing too fancy going on over here. Just our Gibson mother of pearl logo. Looks like Grover tuners on the top. Here's what the truss rod looks like straight from the factory. And even though the back of the guitar is black, we can still see the mahogany neck right here. So that makes it different from the other Bats acoustic models because those have multi-piece maples. And in general, the J-45 is like the player's acoustic. We talked about them a little bit in the J-45 custom episode, where they took the player's model, made it super fancy. This is kind of another one of those. But hey, that's what my channel is all about, the cool limited editions. That's what gets me excited. Moving on to the backside, as we said earlier. Top and back are made out of mahogany, but it's completely black. We don't get to see anything back here. But here's a better look at the output jack / end pin. And as most good Gibson acoustics, they do not ship with a second one. You're meant to get one of those straps that wraps around your headstock. Or just play it sitting down or sink it into the heel in whatever direction you'd like. But the back binding is only single ply. And I measure this to be 4.75 inches thick. But now moving up the backside of the neck, you can see what I was talking about earlier here in regular lighting situations, not outside. Just has so much cool rosiness, it really contrasts against that dark neck. But again, I can personally confirm this is a gloss finish. But there's our Gibson Custom Shop logo and confirmed Grover tuners, and it's a good thing we have that serial number in the sound hole sticker because it is stamped a little bit faintly on the backside of the headstock with our Made in USA stamp. All said and done, this one's pretty light, 4 pounds, 6.5 ounces. If you compare the weight to the other ones available, they generally range between 4 and 5 pounds. So let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how it sounds, as well as a basic acoustic test. There's a quick taste of what it sounds like acoustically, not fancily mic'd up or anything, just by the cameras. You can definitely hear that the Bats in Flight proper model has a lot more of a higher pitch tone to it, more trebles. more warmer approach, which is how many of Gibson's acoustics are. I kind of like the maple-backed one because it's got a bit more treble to it. But that's what's great about having two different models, having the slope shoulders, Dreadnought style, other levels of fanciness. This serves a different purpose than the design that we've seen many a times before. But don't forget, you can actually plug this one in, so you guys can enjoy some B-roll while I noodle around on it some more. So there we go, the 2024 J-45 Bats. What are my final thoughts on this? I think the video speaks for itself as far as whether you want the higher end version or this. It's not necessarily just coming down to the ornamentations. The sound is vastly different. So if you were never a fan of the maple bodied acoustics or just thought the old style was just a little bit too gaudy and expensive, that's exactly who this one is for. And now that I've played it, I totally get it, why somebody might actually even prefer this one over that. So at the time of recording, I don't know what the future's like. Is it going to be like the original ones? They sell out, become scarce, and never get sold ever again? Maybe, but I just wanted to make sure I could document one before that became the case. Especially to get a primo example like this one with the cool bridge and the cool rosewood coloring. But I'll be real curious to see, do we get more bats in 2025 and like we see them on Les Paul Standard or something to make a more widespread release if we're going to toy around with the lower end models? So alright, Troglodytes, that's the end of the bats for this year. If I do any more, or Guitar Center makes any more, we'll save them for next October. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.